Have you ever noticed how sometimes the most revealing moments come when people are trying to say nothing at all? Well, that's exactly what happened when Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White stepped up to the podium before their game against Seattle. And what she didn't say about Caitlin Clark's recovery might be even more shocking than what she did. But before we dive into the bombshell details that have the entire WNBA world buzzing, make sure to hit that like button if you're ready for some truth bombs that the mainstream media won't tell you. The tension in the room was palpable as reporters gathered for what seemed like a routine pre-game press conference. But anyone who's been following the Indiana Fever knows that nothing has been routine about this season. With the Fever sitting at 16-12, fighting tooth and nail for playoff positioning, every game matters. But the elephant in the room wasn't about standings or strategy. It was about the one player whose absence has somehow made this team stronger, yet whose return could change everything. When the first reporter asked about the team's success without their star player, you could almost see Stephanie White's jaw tighten. Her response was carefully measured, talking about the team's depth and resilience. But here's where it gets interesting. She praised the team's connectivity, their selflessness, their ability to rally together. Yet not once did she mention how long they've been preparing for life without Caitlin. Not once did she acknowledge what insiders have been whispering about for weeks. The truth is, this Indiana Fever team has discovered something revolutionary. They've learned how to win without relying on a single superstar. And that revelation has some people in very high places extremely uncomfortable. Think about it. When your entire marketing strategy revolves around one player, when ticket sales and TV ratings are tied to one name, what happens when the team proves they don't need that player to succeed? But the real shocker came when a reporter finally asked the question everyone wanted answered. How is Caitlin Clark's recovery going? Watch Stephanie White's body language during this moment. The pause, the careful word choice, the way she said recovery is going well, but immediately followed with talk about being patient and avoiding setbacks. Any coach who's dealt with a player pushing too hard to come back knows exactly what that means. Sources close to the team have revealed that Caitlin has been absolutely relentless in her push to return. She's been showing up to practice, going through drills, doing everything short of full contact. But here's what nobody's talking about. The medical staff has allegedly had to intervene multiple times to prevent her from doing too much too soon. This isn't just about physical recovery anymore. This is about protecting a player from herself. And then there's the Sophie Cunningham factor that nobody saw coming. While everyone's been focused on Caitlin's absence, Sophie has quietly been putting together performances that have league executives taking notice. In fact, during their recent win, when Kelsey Mitchell went ice cold from three-point range, hitting 0 of her 8 attempts, it was Sophie who stepped up in ways that had even the opposing coaches shaking their heads in disbelief. But here's where the plot thickens. Multiple sources have confirmed that during the game, there were several possessions where Sophie was wide open, calling for the ball, and certain players simply refused to pass to her. The politics of professional basketball are real, folks, and what we witnessed was nothing short of sabotage. When you have a player who's red hot, who's proven she can deliver in clutch moments, and teammates are freezing her out, that tells you everything you need to know about the power dynamics at play. Now, let's talk about the elephant that left the room. Dana Evans. Stephanie White didn't mention her, but her absence speaks volumes. Since Evans departed, this team has been on an absolute tear. The ball movement has improved dramatically. The defensive rotations are crisper. The energy is different. Sometimes addition by subtraction is real, and the Fever have proven that removing a toxic element can transform a team's chemistry overnight. What makes this situation even more fascinating is the timing. With the Fever making a serious playoff push, conventional wisdom says you'd want your superstar back as soon as possible. But sources within the organization are suggesting something different. There's a growing belief that this team has found its identity without Caitlin, and bringing her back too soon could disrupt the delicate balance they've created. Think about what Stephanie White said about their offensive system. They're moving the ball, finding the right shot, playing with patience and purpose. Translation, they're not just dumping the ball to one player and hoping for magic. They've developed a sustainable system that doesn't rely on heroics. That's championship basketball, not highlight reel basketball. But here's the million-dollar question nobody wants to ask out loud. What happens when Caitlin comes back? How do you reintegrate a superstar into a system that's thriving without her? How do you manage egos when role players have stepped up and proven they deserve more touches? How do you balance marketing demands with basketball reality? The answer might lie in what Stephanie White didn't say. When asked about Caitlyn's return timeline, she was deliberately vague. "I still don't know how far we are," she said. That's coach speak for, "We're in no rush." And why should they be? This team is winning, they're building confidence, they're proving that Indiana Fever basketball is bigger than any one player. But let's get real for a moment. The league needs Caitlin Clark on the court. Ticket sales, merchandise, TV ratings, they all spike when she plays. The pressure on Stephanie White to rush her back must be immense. Yet she's standing firm, talking about patience and avoiding setbacks. That takes serious courage in a business where wins and losses can cost you your job. And then there's Kelsey Mitchell's situation. Going 0 for 8 from 3 in a professional basketball game is brutal. But what's even more telling is how the team responded. Instead of forcing the ball to their struggling star, they found other options. They adapted. They overcame. That's the mark of a mature team, and it's something that doesn't happen overnight. The arrival of Aria McDonald has been another game changer that deserves more attention. Stephanie White praised her speed and defensive intensity, but what she didn't mention is how McDonald has essentially made certain players expendable. When you have a backup point guard who can push the pace and create opportunities the way she does, suddenly your offensive system becomes less predictable and more dynamic. Sources within the locker room have also revealed that McDonald's work ethic has raised the bar for everyone. She's first in the gym, last to leave, constantly studying film. That kind of dedication is contagious, and it's no coincidence that the team's performance has elevated since her arrival. Sometimes all it takes is one player who refuses to accept mediocrity to transform an entire culture. But let's circle back to the Caitlin Clark situation, because there's more to this story than anyone's letting on. Recent reports suggest that her recovery has hit several unexpected hurdles. While the team maintains it's all part of the normal process, insiders are painting a different picture. There have been moments where progress stalled, where frustration boiled over, where the timeline had to be adjusted yet again. What's particularly interesting is how Stephanie White handled questions about team chemistry. She emphasized how players are playing for each other and how important that connectivity is. That's not random coach speak. That's a deliberate message to anyone who thinks this team is just marking time until their superstar returns. They've found something special, and they're not about to let it go. The Seattle game itself proved to be a perfect example of this new identity. Facing a team coming off double overtime just 40 hours earlier, the Fever could have relied on individual talent to exploit tired legs. Instead, they used their depth, constantly rotating fresh bodies, wearing down their opponents through systematic pressure. It's the kind of strategic basketball that wins in the playoffs, not just the regular season. And here's something that should make every Fever fan excited. This team is learning how to win ugly. When shots aren't falling, when the offense gets stuck, they're finding ways to grind out victories. That's not something you can teach. It's something that develops through adversity, through learning to rely on each other when the superstar safety net isn't there. The defensive improvements have been particularly striking. Stephanie White mentioned their ability to be disruptive, to maintain attention to detail, even when things aren't going perfectly on offense. That's elite team defense, not just individual effort. It's switching seamlessly, rotating with purpose, trusting your teammates to be where they're supposed to be. And it's working at a level nobody expected. But perhaps the most telling moment of the press conference came when Stephanie White talked about not letting opponents get to their comfort zones. That's exactly what this team has done to the entire league's perception of them. Everyone expected them to struggle without Caitlin. Everyone assumed they'd be counting down the days until her return. Instead, they've forced the entire WNBA to reconsider what Indiana Fever basketball really means. The financial implications of this success can't be ignored either. Yes, Caitlin Clark sells tickets, but a winning team that plays exciting, unselfish basketball, that builds a sustainable fan base, that creates a culture people want to be part of, that attracts free agents who see an organization that values team success over individual glory. In the long run, that might be worth more than any single player's marketing appeal. And let's not forget the psychological aspect of this situation. Every player on this roster now knows they can succeed at the highest level without relying on a superstar. That confidence doesn't disappear when Caitlin returns. It becomes the foundation for something bigger. It transforms role players into reliable contributors. It turns good teams into great ones. The coaching staff deserves massive credit for managing this transition. It would have been easy to constantly reference Caitlin's absence, to use it as an excuse for any struggles. Instead, they've embraced the challenge, developed new strategies, and empowered players who might have been overlooked. That's not just good coaching, that's leadership that transforms organizations. As we look ahead, the questions become even more intriguing. How will Caitlin Clark fit into this new system when she returns? Will she embrace a different role, one that maximizes the team's newfound strengths? Or will there be friction as the team tries to balance what's working with what's expected? These are the storylines that will define the Indiana Fever's season and possibly their future. One thing's for certain, Stephanie White's careful words at that press conference revealed more than she probably intended. This isn't just about managing an injury anymore. This is about protecting something special that's been built in adversity. This is about proving that Indiana Fever basketball is bigger than any individual, no matter how talented. The next few weeks will be crucial. Will the team continue their momentum? Will Caitlin's return timeline suddenly accelerate as playoff positioning becomes more critical? Will the chemistry issues that seem to be bubbling under the surface explode into full view? These are the questions keeping WNBA insiders up at night. What we're witnessing might be the birth of a new era in Indiana basketball. An era where team comes first, where depth matters more than star power, where winning ugly is just as valuable as winning pretty. It's not the story anyone expected when the season began, but it might be exactly the story this franchise needed. Before we wrap up, remember to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates on this developing situation. The truth about Caitlin Clark's return and what it means for this transformed Indiana Fever team is a story that's far from over. Comment below with your thoughts. Do you think the Fever are better without their superstar? Or is this success just a temporary mirage? Either way, one thing's certain. The next chapter of this saga is going to be must-watch basketball.